We tend to take for granted that if we are accused of a crime, we will have a fair hearing in a court of law. We take for granted that we are all equal before the law, whether we have money or not, and that those who work with the law are responsive, accountable, open, and transparent in their work. However, this is not a universal experience, and certainly not the experience of Clãudemir and Adelino Ramos and their family. This documentary hopefully will convey how different their experience in the forests of the Amazonas are from those of us who live and work in England. Adelino Ramos and Clãudemir Ramos, his son, were both survivors of O Massacre de Corumbiara. This event is a landmark in the history of the landless in Brazil. On the 14th of July 1995, hundreds of families occupied a small part of a fazenda called Santa Helena in the city of Corumbiara in Rondônia. Some 25 days later, on the 9th of August, a living hell descended on those whose only dream had been for a piece of land, and a right given them in the Brazilian constitution drawn up by Tancredo Neves. Corumbiara was different from the other 440 conflicts over land that took place in Brazil in 1995. Corumbiara was different from the many other conflicts that took place in Rondônia over land in 1995. It was different because of the summary and violent executions that took place in the early hours of the morning. The tortures, beatings and inhuman acts carried out by police and thugs hired by local landowners. To this day, there are still people unaccounted for, killings for which others are unaccountable, and the destruction of families and lives that have yet to be recompensed. There are still many questions about Corumbiara that need answering. The work of Professora Helena Angelica de Mesquita is perhaps the best account of what happened, with its focus on how no evidence was produced at the trials, which would stand the scrutiny of others, especially international observers. The Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, in their report of 2004, demanded of the Brazilian state that it conduct a complete, impartial and effective investigation into the events by non-military organs to determine responsibility for the deaths, personal injuries and other acts that occurred at Santa Helena Ranch on August the 9th, 1995, and to punish all the material and intellectual authors, whether civilian or military, as well as make adequate reparations to the victims specified in this report or to their next of kin as appropriate for the human rights violations determined in this report. The Brazilian state has yet to comply in full with the recommendations raised in the report of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights in 2004. According to the Catholic Land Commission, over 1,500 people have been killed in rural violence since 1985, but less than 100 people have been convicted, and only one who ordered a killing has been put behind bars. This same lack of transparency and accountability was there again in Vista Alegre, Rondônia, in May 2011, when Adelino Ramos was gunned down, at close range within feet of his two small children and their mother. His killer, Azeas Vicente, was known in the area as a gun for hire. How he came to be bailed, having been remanded for killing Dinho, is still shrouded in darkness. Discovering who ordered his killing and who ordered Dinho's killing will not be helped by a process that allowed a judge to confine both cases to the archives on the death of Azeas Vicente. After Corumbiara, Adelino Ramos continued to be the leader of the Movimento Camponeses Corumbiara, MCC. An advocate of non-violence, Dinho continued to help some 15,000 people settle on 37 sites in accordance with the Brazilian constitution and government policies over a period of some 16 years. Unlike the big fazendeiros, Dino Ramos was more interested in settling people on the land within the forest. He ran training shops that emphasized practical skills on how to work the land and also respect nature, how to glean a harvest, and keep the earth breathing and alive. Dino was killed for speaking out against the illegal, destructive logging by powerful others seeking only their own self-interest and profit. He had received many threats and turned down several bribes prior to his eventual murder. He turned down offers that included as much land as he wanted, money, and even an expensive 4x4 vehicle. In 2010, he told the National Agrarian Ombudsman, Ouvidor Agrario Nacional, and the Commission for the Combat of Rural Violence and Conflicts, Comissão de Combate à Violência e Conflitos no Campo, that he feared for his life. He passed on the relevant details of those making these threats to the same authorities, but to no avail. With questions still unanswered, in February 2013, we headed across Brazil to Porto Velho, within whose jurisdiction Corumbiara and Vista Alegre lie. Once there, conversations with several local politicians and lawyers exposed the weaknesses of the legal and democratic systems that operate in Rondônia. We were left in no doubt that national and federal systems come second to the vested interests of a few big landowners in what some in Brasilia describe as bandit territory. From Porto Alegre, we travelled by car westwards towards the Bolivian border and the town where Dino was killed, Vista Alegre do Abuna. We travelled through vast tracts of beautiful lands where the wood has made way for cattle. To feed an individual cow requires approximately an acre of forest to be cut down and made into grassland. A great deal of money can be made from these fazendas and the large herds that roam them. One's eyes are not drawn to villages with people living and working in them in this vast terrain that was once forest. Instead, it is the road, vastly improved over the last few years, that commands our attention. We moved on, and across the mighty Madeira River, awed by the majesty and beauty of this principal tributary of the Amazon, some 3,250 kilometers long. After some 200 kilometers by car, we reached Vista Alegre. Vista Alegre is indeed a place that is up and coming, rather than one that has arrived. It is a place where you would not linger, and where you feel you could easily be identified as an outsider. The wooden fences and houses proclaim the town's reliance on and loyalty to that industry. It is a fact you cannot ignore, and if you do, you ignore it at your peril. We came to the town of Vista Alegre do Abuna, Rondônia State, to talk with officers at the police station where the first news of Dino's murder was relayed. Politely, they told us that they could not answer any questions. All relevant investigations had been carried out by the federal police, and they did not talk to the civil police about their findings. Where, we asked ourselves, was the transparency and joined-up thinking of a murder case that is still open? We had been told that at least 2 people in Vista Alegre do Abuna would tell us what had happened to Dino. We went to interview them. One refused to tell us anything that could be repeated. The other denied any knowledge of being a friend of Dino or knowing him in any depth. Both appeared frightened, and both gave us the wrong directions to the spot where Dino met his end. It was a sad day for openness, human solidarity, and Brazilian justice. There is nothing to mark the spot where Adelino Ramos Dino was gunned down in May 2011 in front of his children. It suits the purpose of anyone who ordered that killing that Dino should in death be anonymous. The man who shot him is also death. No name defines the dirt track road. Like the illegal logging this rural leader denounced, Dino's falling cries out to heaven for justice to be seen to be done. This is a place where the grass grows and where lorries are parked and no one says anything. But Dino's son still seeks justice for himself and his father.
Senhor Cláudio,
Cláudio Ramos has always denied being responsible for what happened at Corumbiara. He rejects the view that he was given a fair trial, though he remembers being tortured, thrown into prison, and escaping. Cláudio Ramos considers himself a fugitive from injustice and describes Corumbiara as a tragedy of death and torture for the workers. He has often thought about giving himself in, but if he did so, knows that, like his father, he would be killed by those who fear leaders rising up among the Camponeses seeking land reform. He rejects violence as a solution and looks to the ballot box to bring about change in land reform in Brazil. For this to happen, however, he thinks the government needs to have far more courage and work closely with the people of the Campo in solidarity, and not give in to the powerful and those who possess land. Too many living in comfort seek their own vested interests. He will tell you that his father was someone who could not be bought by corrupt government officials, that he held the appropriate authority and documentation from the government organizations of INCRA and IBAMA, and that he was killed defending the forests of the Amazons and helping workers settle on the land in the midst of corruption. He will tell you that there is no justice for the poor in Brazil, only for the rich. Asked what he would say to Europeans who say, well, that's what you'd expect in Brazil, isn't it? He says that he thinks it's sad to hear that Europeans should expect it to be normal in any place, that people have to struggle to get their human rights. We later met with Cláudio's sister, Celia. She told me how her family had been badly affected by Corumbiara. Her brother, she says, is still being persecuted today, in that he is wanted for a crime he did not commit. She likened her father, who was leader of the Union of Rural Workers at the time of Corumbiara, to the Good Shepherd, who sacrificed his own interests for others. She told me how he had been a light to others, helping to settle 15,000 people on 37 settlements. Asked whether she thought his sacrifice was worth it, she said that it was. She considers he died with God, that he provides hope for others, and showed the way to progress and a society that is more just. As for the future of the Amazons, she hopes for political change, a more united stance in society leading to constitutional reform that protects human rights for all. She looks forward to the day when all the people in Brazil have the same rights, whether they have money or not. At the moment, as she sees it, the same legal system frees the guilty and punishes the innocent. Brazil is a rich country with beauty and great people and a source of great food. It will be the host to the World Youth Day that Pope Francis will attend. Brazil is a country of the future. It will host the World Cup in 2014. It will host the Olympics in 2016. It wants a seat on the UN Security Council. So long as it does not address its long-standing tolerance of injustice and land inequality, it should not, however, be allowed this leading role. To do otherwise would be only para o inglês ver e nada mais. for the Englishman to see, and nothing more.